Major Jack Peterson's muscles tightened as the military transport plane touched down at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. The familiar stretch of runway came into view, one he had often imagined during the sleepless nights of his deployment in Afghanistan. Arriving 2 weeks earlier than expected, he allowed himself a rare smile, thinking of the joy on his family's faces when they saw him. His weathered fingers brushed against his phone, its edges worn from countless hours in his pocket. The screen displayed nothing but silence, no calls, no texts, no messages. The emptiness had lingered for weeks, and though Jack had chalked it up to poor connectivity in the field, a nagging feeling deep in his gut told him something was not right. The relative calm of the base was a stark contrast to the chaos he had endured over the past 2 years. No rumbling explosions in the distance, no urgent radio commands, no perpetual sense of danger. Instead, there were the soft hum of passing cars and the muted chatter of personnel going about their day. His thoughts shifted to his son, Ryan, who had just turned 8. Ryan had been only 6 when Jack left, so young but already showing flashes of the resilience that had carried Jack through Special Forces training. Over those 2 years, Jack had missed countless milestones: Ryan's 7th birthday, his first grade graduation, even his first lost tooth. But now, he was home, ready to make up for lost time. The cab ride to his suburban neighborhood felt endless. Jack stared out at the landmarks he once knew, each one subtly altered. New shops had sprung up, traffic patterns had shifted, it all reminded him of how much had changed. The driver seemed to sense Jack's military demeanor, and kept the ride free of conversation. When they finally arrived, Jack's sharp eyes immediately caught the differences in his home. The roses his wife, Emma, had meticulously cared for were gone, replaced by generic shrubs. The house looked less like a home and more like a structure maintained by routine, not love. His gut tightened. Mrs. Grant, the elderly neighbor who had lived next door for decades, stood frozen on her porch. Her expression flickered between shock and something Jack couldn't quite place. Was it pity? She opened her mouth, but no words came. Instead, she retreated inside, leaving Jack to face his home alone. Jack paid the driver, slung his duffel bag over his shoulder, and approached the house. The key slid easily into the lock, but as the door opened, an unfamiliar emptiness greeted him. The walls, once covered with family photos, were bare. The faint, comforting smell of vanilla candles that Emma loved had been replaced by a sterile, impersonal air. Jack's voice echoed through the quiet space as he called out, "Ryan? Emma?" The silence was broken by the rapid pounding of footsteps. "Dad? Dad!" Ryan's voice trembled with emotion as he hurled himself down the stairs and into Jack's arms. Jack caught him, his son's small frame colliding with his chest. He held Ryan close, inhaling the scent of his hair, feeling the slight quiver in his body. But even in this moment of reunion, Jack's instincts screamed that something was deeply wrong. Ryan clung to him with a desperation Jack couldn't ignore. "I miss you, buddy," Jack said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. He pulled back to look at Ryan's face. The boy had grown taller, his features sharper, but his eyes held a wariness that didn't belong to a child. "Where's your mom?" Jack asked gently, already bracing himself for an answer he knew would not be simple. Ryan froze, his expression shifting to one of hesitation and fear. "She's at church," he mumbled. Then, after a pause, he added, "Getting married." Jack felt the words hit him like a punch to the gut, but years of combat training kept his face impassive. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice low and controlled. "To Uncle Mark," Ryan said, his voice breaking as the words spilled out. "Your friend. Everyone's there, Grandma, Grandpa, Aunt Sarah." Ryan hesitated again, then added, She said you abandoned us? That you chose war over family." Jack's heart clenched. He placed a steadying hand on Ryan's shoulder. "Look at me, son," he said firmly. "I need you to tell me everything." Ryan's story came in pieces, each word adding another layer to the betrayal. Mark had started coming around not long after Jack deployed, first as a family friend, then as something more. Over time, Emma had changed. She had taken down the family photos, distanced herself, and eventually made her plans clear. Ryan's small voice trembled as he repeated their harsh words, but Jack's resolve only hardened. "You have been so strong," Jack told his son, his voice firm. "Now it is my turn." When Jack asked if Ryan wanted to come to the church, the boy's answer was immediate. "I'm coming with you, Dad. I want to see their faces when they know you're home." Jack nodded, his mind already formulating a plan. As they drove to St. Mary's Church, his thoughts churned. This was not a battlefield of bombs and bullets, but one of truth and betrayal. Jack Peterson was ready to fight, not as a soldier but as a father reclaiming what was his. The email had felt oddly urgent. We need to talk about Emma. It is important. At the time, I dismissed it as typical family drama. I was in the middle of combat operations, and the last thing I needed was to get pulled into domestic issues back home. But now, those words took on a completely different meaning, a weak, half-hearted attempt at a warning that ultimately amounted to nothing. Dad? Ryan's voice pulled me out of my thoughts. Are you mad? I glanced down at him, noting the worry etched into his young face. Not at you, son. Never at you. I took a deep breath. But yes, I am angry. Angry at the adults who should have known better. The ones who should have protected this family, not torn it apart. Even Grandma and Grandpa? Ryan asked hesitantly. Especially them. I replied, my voice hardening. Family is supposed to mean something, Ryan. It is about loyalty, honor, trust. Your grandparents saw this happening and chose to stay silent. They picked a side, and it was the wrong one. The parking lot of St. Mary's Church came into view. The sight of familiar cars made my stomach turn. There was my mother's silver sedan, perfectly parked in the shade, and my father's classic Mustang, the one he had promised to work on with me when I got home. And then, parked closest to the entrance, was Mark's flashy convertible, a car he had likely bought with profits from the security business we had once dreamed of building together. My jaw clenched at the thought. I pulled the car around to the back of the church, instincts kicking in. Ryan, I said, turning to him, listen closely. What happens in there might be loud. It might scare people, or make them angry. But I need you to remember something. Everything I do is to protect what is right. Do you understand? Ryan nodded, his face set with determination. Like when you fight a war to keep us safe? Exactly. I said. Sometimes battles are fought with guns and bombs in faraway places. Other times they are fought here, with words and actions. But the principle is always the same. You fight for what is right, and you do not back down from the truth. We got out of the car. As the first strains of the wedding march filtered through the church doors, I felt a surge of disgust. This ceremony wasn't a celebration, it was a mockery. A parade of betrayal. What are you going to do, Dad? Ryan asked, his small hand slipping into mine for reassurance. I gave his hand a gentle squeeze. Stay close to me, son. It is time for some truth. As we walked toward the side entrance, I caught our reflection in a window, father and son side by side. Me in my dusty uniform, Ryan in casual clothes, both standing tall. In that moment, I saw not just my son but a young warrior in the making, learning lessons about loyalty and honor far too early. Remember this moment, I said quietly. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand up for what is right, even when it hurts. Ryan's chin lifted in a way that reminded me of myself. I'm ready, Dad. I took a deep breath and mapped the church layout in my mind. The tactical part of me kicked in, analyzing positions, planning movements. The sound of the organ swelled, and a cold smile crept across my face. Back in Afghanistan they had called me the Wolf, for my ability to strike when it mattered most. Now, it was time to remind everyone here exactly why that name carried weight. Time to crash a wedding, I murmured, pushing open the heavy wooden doors. The doors flew open with a resounding crash, the sound echoing through the church's vaulted ceiling. I stood there, still in my dusty uniform, Ryan at my side. The wedding march screeched to a halt, the organist frozen in shock. 200 heads turned to face us, their collective gasp rolling through the room like a wave. I took in the scene with precision. Emma stood at the altar in a designer wedding gown that probably cost more than my entire year's combat pay. Mark stood next to her, looking smug in his tailored tuxedo. The front pew held my parents and sister, their celebratory expressions dissolving into horror. Do not let me interrupt, I said, my voice cutting through the stunned silence. I just came to congratulate the happy couple. I walked down the aisle deliberately, each step a statement. Ryan stayed at my side, his presence amplifying the weight of the moment. The congregation shifted uncomfortably, whispers rippling like suppressed panic. Dad, Ryan whispered, pointing to a woman trying to shrink into her seat. That is Mrs. Carter. She helped Mom pick the flowers. I nodded, cataloging each face. There were neighbors, old friends, even some veterans from the local chapter who had promised to look after my family. They all knew. They all stayed silent. Emma found her voice first. Jack, you were not supposed to be here. Clearly, I said, stepping onto the altar. 2 years. 2 years I spent risking my life in combat zones. And while I was away, you and Mark decided to play house with my son. My voice remained calm, but the edge was unmistakable. Mark stepped forward, raising his hands in what he probably thought was a soothing gesture. Jack, let me explain. My fist met his jaw before he could finish. The punch was calculated and precise, honed by years of training. Mark crumpled to the floor, blood staining his pristine tuxedo. Gasps and screams erupted around us. Emma stumbled backward, clutching her bouquet like a lifeline. I turned to her, my voice cold and sharp. Wives do not betray their husbands. And families do not betray their own. My mother rushed forward, her voice frantic. Jack, we only wanted. Save it. I snapped. You all made your choices. Now you live with them. I turned to the congregation, my voice booming. Let me make this perfectly clear. My wife and my best friend betrayed me. My family knew and covered for them. And this entire farce of a wedding was timed for when I was supposed to be thousands of miles away. I let the words sink in. Remember their faces. Remember what they did. I looked down at Ryan, his hands still gripping mine. His face held not fear, but pride. Together, we turned and walked out of the church. The congregation parted before us like a wave, no one daring to meet my eyes. At the door I paused, turning back for one final word. Emma, Mark, enjoy your special day. My smile wasn't one of joy but a sharp, cold expression any enemy from my combat days would recognize. Consider it a declaration of war. As Ryan and I stepped out into the sunlight, he glanced up at me with a question. Are we going home now, Dad? I shook my head. No, son. We're going to build a new home. And then, we're going to teach them all about justice. Behind us, the church erupted into chaos, but I didn't look back. Combat had taught me one unshakable rule: you never look back after launching an attack. You adapt, move forward, and ensure your enemies regret ever thinking you were a soft target. The battle had begun, and Jack Peterson was just getting started. The key turned smoothly in the lock of our new rental house. It was a modest 2-story place on the other side of town, far removed from the painful memories of our old home. Ryan's footsteps echoed as he explored the empty rooms, his voice calling out. Where's my room, Dad? Upstairs, second door on the right. I replied, setting my laptop on the kitchen counter. My mind was already running at full speed. The military had taught me that intelligence was the foundation of any successful operation. I needed allies, evidence, and a rock-solid plan. My phone buzzed, a message from Emma's lawyer. Divorce proceedings, custody demands, claims of me being an unstable veteran. I deleted it without reading further. They still thought they were dealing with a predictable opponent. They had no idea what was coming. A sharp knock interrupted my thoughts. Opening the door, I found a compact woman with sharp features and a no-nonsense stance. Jack Peterson? She asked. Marie Rodriguez, former military intelligence. Lieutenant Colonel Davidson thought I might be of use. I stepped aside to let her in. What's your assessment so far? She placed a folder on the counter, her movements efficient. Your situation caught my attention. I've already started gathering preliminary intel. Marie spread a series of photographs across the counter. This has been in the works for months. Mark isn't just a friend who got too close. He's been systematically replacing you in every aspect of your life. She pointed at a photo of Mark and Emma at a dinner. He's been building relationships with your business contacts, telling people you abandoned your family. Another image showed my parents with Mark and Emma at a family gathering. Your parents have been helping fund this whole charade. My jaw tightened as she slid bank statements across the counter. They showed transfers from my parents, financing the wedding and a down payment on a new house. How deep does this go? I asked, my voice hard. Marie pulled out a property listing. Your sister acted as their realtor. She's been helping them find a home in Riverside. They're using profits from your business partnership to fund it. Upstairs, Ryan called out again. Dad, where should I put my books? I'll be there in a minute. I turned back to Marie. What about Ryan? What's their plan for him? Her face darkened. They're filing for full custody, using your military service against you. They're portraying you as an absent, unstable father. They've been coaching Ryan to turn him against you. I clenched my fists. They think I'm broken. They have no idea who they're dealing with. They really don't. Marie agreed. They think you're just a soldier, not a strategist. I began organizing the photos. I want everything: their routines, communications, finances. Every weakness, every leverage point. Marie nodded, already pulling out her laptop. Steve's business is riddled with issues. He's falsifying contracts and skimming profits. Your parents' spotless reputation? It's built on shaky foundations. Emma's teaching career has complaints buried in her file. Good. I want a map of everyone involved, I said. When we strike, we take down the entire operation. For the next hour, we piece together a picture of betrayal. Credit card statements, hotel receipts, text messages, all evidence of their deceit laid out in stark detail. Marie hesitated before sliding one last file across the table. You need to see this. It's your family's group chat. I scanned the messages, my stomach tightening with every line. My mother's thinly veiled concern. We just need to ease him back into things. My father's advice to Mark about inheritance. My sister's suggestion to make it seem like Jack is overreacting. They thought they had it all planned, I said quietly. The grieving widow, the loyal friend, the supportive family. All wrapped up in a perfect little lie. Marie's lips curled into a grim smile. But instead they got you. I met her gaze. Let's start with Mark's business. Tell me about these contracts. Marie pulled up financial documents. He's been securing investments based on your name. The numbers don't add up. One anonymous tip to the Securities and Exchange Commission? I suggested. Not yet, I said, raising a hand. First, I want a full map: investors, clients, connections. When we strike, we dismantle everything. Ryan came downstairs, pausing at the sight of Marie. I introduced them. She's here to help us make things right. Ryan studied her. Are you going to help Dad fight them? That's right, she said. Your dad's a tactical expert. We're going to make sure no one gets away with this. Ryan nodded, his young face set with determination. Remember what you taught me, Dad? Gather intelligence, find weaknesses, make a plan, and show no mercy. Exactly, I said, ruffling his hair. Now go finish unpacking. We've got work to do. After Ryan left, Marie raised an eyebrow. He's a tough kid. He's a soldier's son, I said simply. He understands loyalty better than they ever will. I turned back to the evidence. Show me everything you have on Mark's investors. It is time to dismantle his empire. The congregation parted before us like a wave, no one daring to make eye contact. At the door, I paused and glanced back one last time. Emma, Mark, I called out, my voice steady and deliberate. Enjoy your special day. The smile I gave them wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile that once made enemies in combat tremble. Consider this your declaration of war. We stepped into the sunlight, and Ryan turned to me. Are we going home now, Dad? I shook my head. No, son. We're going to build something new. And then we're going to teach them what justice really looks like. Behind us, the sounds of chaos erupted from the church, but I didn't look back. Combat had taught me a critical rule: never look back once the mission begins. You adapt, move forward, and ensure your enemies regret every step they took against you. This wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. Steve's assistant had quit earlier that day, storming out of the office after receiving an anonymous email detailing her boss's history of harassment claims. I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile as I composed the next round of carefully calculated messages. My sister, Rebecca, was next. Her real estate business wasn't nearly as ethical as she pretended. Anonymous complaints to the licensing board outlined a litany of violations: insider trading, undisclosed fees, and falsified documents. It was only a matter of time before her professional life unraveled. Dad? Ryan's voice broke my focus. Uncle Mark is on TV. I turned up the volume, watching as Mark stood outside his office building, sweating in his expensive suit. He stammered through a weak defense against mounting allegations. Reporters shouted questions about fraudulent contracts, stolen valor, and misappropriated funds, his confident facade cracking under the pressure. Is this part of your plan? Ryan asked, his eyes glued to the screen. This is just the beginning, I replied. What happens to people who betray trust, Ryan? They lose everything, he said with quiet determination. Exactly. Another alert popped up on my phone. My parents' country club had received an interesting package that morning, documents exposing my father's inappropriate behavior toward young staff members and proof of cover-ups. Marie's update confirmed the fallout. My father's membership was revoked, my mother's social reputation was in freefall, and Rebecca's real estate license had been suspended pending investigation. I composed my next move, releasing the school board documents. Within hours, Emma's carefully curated image as the abandoned military wife began to crumble. Anonymous sources provided the school board with proof of her affair with a married man while his wife was deployed. Veterans groups, already outraged by the wedding fiasco, began attending social events where Emma and Mark appeared, loudly sharing stories of my service and sacrifices. Marie joined me later for a status briefing. Steve's company stock has plummeted by 60%. Emma's on administrative leave. Your parents are social pariahs. They destroyed themselves. I corrected her coldly. I'm just making sure everyone sees it. The psychological warfare continued relentlessly. Veterans showed up at restaurants where Emma dined, loudly discussing loyalty and betrayal. Business meetings where Mark pitched to investors were interrupted by former soldiers asking pointed questions about his military claims. Ryan sat next to me one evening as I reviewed the latest reports. Mom called, I told him. She wants to meet. Are you going to talk to her? Ryan asked, not looking up from his homework. No. She's trying to gather sympathy for a counterattack. I held up a report detailing Emma and Mark's frantic efforts to salvage their reputations. Emergency meetings with lawyers, desperate calls to media contacts, attempts to frame me as an unstable veteran. Marie smirked. They still think they can win. They haven't realized the truth yet, I replied. In war, you don't just defeat the enemy. You destroy their ability to fight back. The lawsuit arrived on schedule, just as I predicted. Emma and Mark's lawyers filed for emergency custody, claiming I was an unstable veteran with anger issues. My parents submitted sworn statements about my violent outbursts at the church. The local media ran with their narrative, questioning whether a combat veteran was fit to be a father. I read the court documents without emotion, noting how they twisted every fact to paint me as a threat. My precise actions became obsessive, and my confrontation at the church was spun as uncontrolled violence. They're calling you unstable, Marie said, watching the media coverage. Claiming post-traumatic stress disorder and suggesting you're dangerous. Let's show them what real preparation looks like, I replied. The courtroom was packed for the custody hearing. Emma's lawyer went first, spinning a tale of a troubled veteran, a man consumed by betrayal and anger. Mark testified, painting me as aggressive and unstable while carefully omitting his own role in the betrayal. When it was my turn, I unleashed my counteroffensive. Colonel James Davidson, my commanding officer, took the stand first. Major Peterson is one of the finest officers I've ever commanded, he stated firmly. His psychological evaluations are impeccable, and his control under pressure is unmatched. Next came my fellow soldiers, military psychologists, and child development experts. They described my stability, leadership, and unwavering commitment to Ryan's well-being. Then I presented the evidence, recordings of Emma and Mark coaching Ryan to lie about me, documents proving their attempts to alienate my son, and witness testimony about their actions. Finally, Ryan took the stand. He stood tall, his voice clear and unwavering. Mom and Uncle Mark told me to lie, he said. They said to say my dad was scary and mean. But my dad's a hero. They're the ones who lied. Emma burst into tears. Mark tried to object, but the judge silenced him. My parents sat frozen as their grandson's testimony destroyed their case. The judge's ruling was clear. I retained primary custody. Emma's visitation would be supervised, and her actions were noted for future hearings. Outside the courtroom, Emma grabbed my arm. Why are you doing this? We could have worked something out. I looked at her with cold eyes. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed everything I fought for. Actions have consequences, Emma. You're just beginning to learn that. Marie joined me as Emma fled in tears. They'll appeal. Let them, I said. Every appeal is another chance to expose their lies. Ryan took my hand. Did we win? This battle, yes, I replied. But the war isn't over yet. Turning to Marie, I added. Time for the next phase. Let's show them what a real counterattack looks like. The custody hearing was just another step in my campaign of total destruction against those who thought I was an easy target. As we walked out of the courthouse, I already had my next moves lined up. Grace and Mark had tried to weaponize the legal system against me. Now they'd see why my enemies in combat had always feared my ability to strategize. This war wouldn't end until their comfortable, betrayal-built world was nothing but rubble. Marie Rodriguez entered my office with the confident stride of someone holding all the aces. She carried a thick folder and a predator's grin. "You're going to want to see this," she said, spreading out the photos on my desk. The images told the story clearly. Mark was unraveling. Surveillance photos showed him meeting shady characters in empty parking lots and dimly lit warehouses. Financial records revealed large transfers from offshore accounts, overblown loan applications, and falsified numbers. "He's borrowing from dangerous people," Marie explained, tapping on a photo of Mark with a known loan shark. 3 meetings last week. "He's throwing money at anyone who might help him salvage his empire." I studied the documents. "Let me see the contracts." Marie handed over a stack of papers. "Forged signatures, backdated deals, fake certifications. He stopped pretending to play by the rules. And my dear family?" My voice carried the same calculated calm I used in combat briefings. "They're cracking," she replied with a cold smile. "Your parents are fighting constantly. Your mother blames your father for backing Mark's business. He blames her for encouraging Grace. They've stopped appearing in public together." Marie pulled up surveillance footage on her tablet. "Rebecca's marriage is in shambles. Her husband found out she dipped into their savings to help Grace and Mark buy that house. He's filed for divorce." "And Grace?" I asked. "Drinking heavily," Marie said flatly. "She's missed 3 supervised visits with Ryan. Her lawyers are threatening to quit because she can't pay them. She tried applying for a job in another school district, but our anonymous tips about her behavior followed her." I nodded, satisfied. Through the office window, I watched Ryan playing basketball in our backyard. He was stronger now, free from the weight of manipulation and lies. "There's one more thing," Marie said, her tone turning serious. "Mark's been claiming combat experience to land military contracts. He's using stories that sound suspiciously like your missions." I clenched my jaw. Stolen valor. On top of everything else. I picked up my phone and dialed the number I'd been saving. "Diana, right? This is Major Jack Peterson. I have a story about betrayal, stolen valor, and justice that I think you'll want to hear." "The wedding crash at St. Andrews?" Diana asked, her voice alive with interest. "That was you?" "That was just the opening act. How'd you like an exclusive on what happened after?" "Go on," she said, her tone sharp with professional hunger. I outlined the details: private investigator reports, financial documents, surveillance photos, fraudulent contracts, stolen valor, and the calculated effort to alienate a child from his father. "All verified and documented," I added. "There's a military angle, a decorated soldier betrayed by his wife, best friend, and family. And we've got photos of them celebrating while I was deployed in Afghanistan. This is Pulitzer material, Major," Diana said eagerly. "When can we meet?" "Tomorrow," I replied. "Bring your photographer." After I hung up, I turned to Marie. "Coordinate with Diana. She gets everything: bank records, surveillance footage, court transcripts. Nothing gets left out." "Full exposure?" Marie asked. "No holds barred," I said. "They started this war. Now they'll see it through to the end." That evening, Ryan came inside, sweat dripping from his forehead. "Can we get pizza tonight, Dad?" I smiled. "Sure, buddy. But first we need to talk. Things are going to get intense again. People will be talking about us, about what happened." Ryan nodded, his face serious. "Because you're going to tell the truth?" "That's right. The whole truth. Are you ready for that?" Ryan straightened, unconsciously mimicking my military posture. "They're the ones who should be scared, not us." "Right, Dad?" "Exactly." I shared a glance with Marie. "They're about to learn the difference between lies and real combat." Marie gathered her documents. "I'll finalize everything with Diana and secure the location for the interview. Want me to leak anything ahead of time to build anticipation?" "No," I said. "Let it all hit at once. Maximum impact." The next morning, Diana Wright's article detonated like a precision-guided missile. The headline alone was devastating: Betrayal of Honor, How a Decorated Soldier's Family Conspired Against Him During Deployment. The story began with the wedding interruption but quickly went deeper. Diana had laid it all bare: the timeline of the affair, the family's complicity, Mark's financial crimes, and the attempted custody theft. Every revelation was backed by irrefutable evidence. Local news stations picked up the story immediately, and military blogs were ablaze with outrage. Veterans groups across the country rallied, sharing the article with commentary about loyalty and betrayal. The photos were especially damning: Grace and Mark dining out while I was deployed, my parents celebrating their engagement, Rebecca showing them houses. Each image was dated, documented, and undeniable. Messages flooded my phone. Saw the article. They'll burn for this. Command is furious about Morrison's stolen valor claims. We've got your back, Wolf. Marie arrived mid-morning, her expression triumphant. Mark's business partners are jumping ship. 3 board members from Mark's company resigned early this morning. Stocks are in freefall. Marie reported as she entered the office, her voice carrying an edge of triumph. What about Grace? I asked without looking up. The school board called an emergency meeting. Marie replied, checking her tablet. They're voting to terminate her contract. The public backlash is too intense. I nodded, unsurprised. And my parents? The country club officially revoked their membership. Your father's golf buddies are publicly denouncing him. That brought a small, satisfied smile to my face. Rebecca? Her real estate agency fired her an hour ago. Marie continued. Her husband's divorce attorney is tearing her apart with the revelations about her financial misconduct. It was all unfolding exactly as I'd planned. Diana Wright's article had been a masterstroke, portraying me as the dedicated soldier and father betrayed by those closest to him. She juxtaposed my combat records against Mark's stolen valor, my sacrifices against my family's calculated deceit. The piece didn't just stir public outrage, it triggered criminal investigations. The FBI is officially investigating Mark's business dealings, Marie said, pulling out another report. The military's launched a formal inquiry into his fabricated combat experience. The state bar is looking into Grace's sworn custody statements. Just then, my phone rang. It was Colonel Davidson. Hell of a story, Wolf. Thank you, sir. The military community's behind you. Davidson continued. We take care of our own. Morrison's done. Using your combat stories to secure contracts? That's not just stolen valor, it's fraud. There was a pause before he added. Your parents tried to reach out through command channels. They want a meeting. No contact. I replied firmly. They made their choice. Understood. Davidson said. Keep your guard up. Wounded animals are the most dangerous. As if on cue, Marie entered with another update. Mark's calling an emergency press conference. He's trying to claim the article is a smear campaign. Put it on, I said, motioning to the TV. The screen showed Mark sweating under the midday sun, standing outside his crumbling company headquarters. His expensive suit did little to mask his panic as reporters fired questions at him. Is it true you used Major Peterson's combat experiences to secure contracts? Did you begin the affair with his wife while he was deployed? How long were you planning to marry her before his return? Did you exploit his deployment to make business deals? Mark's polished facade shattered. He shoved a camera aside and stormed into the building, ignoring the shouted questions about fraud investigations and stolen valor. Grace's attempt at damage control fared no better. She gave a tearful interview, claiming she was a misunderstood woman who'd sought comfort in a difficult time. The public wasn't buying it. Evidence of her manipulation of Ryan and her attempts to deny me custody flooded the airwaves, countering her narrative. Meanwhile, my parents faced their own reckoning. Their peers abandoned them en masse, their privileged world crumbling under the weight of their betrayal. Even their vacation home wasn't safe from reporters hounding them for a comment. That afternoon, Ryan came home from school, his backpack covered in handwritten notes of support from classmates. Everyone read the article, Dad, he said, his voice full of pride. They all say you're a hero. I pulled him into a hug. Remember what I taught you about justice. It's not about revenge, he recited. It's about consequences. Exactly, I said, my voice steady. We show people the truth and let them face what they've done. Marie walked in with her afternoon briefing. Steve's military contracts are being cancelled one after another. Grace's teaching license is under review. The FBI executed search warrants at Steve's offices. They're running out of moves, I said, my tone calm but firm. Good. The counterattack came sooner than expected. Mark attempted to transfer massive sums to offshore accounts, triggering federal banking alerts. Grace tried to flee with Ryan during a supervised visit but was stopped by veterans' aids stationed nearby. Every desperate move they made only exposed their true nature further. Diana called that evening, her voice charged with excitement. The article's gone national, Major. Every major network wants to cover it. Veterans groups are demanding a congressional inquiry into stolen valor. Keep pushing, I instructed. No stone unturned. By the end of the day, the destruction was complete. Mark's company stock collapsed, Grace faced criminal charges for interference with custody, and my parents were left shunned and disgraced. Rebecca's life was similarly in ruins, her career over, her marriage irreparably damaged. Every thread of their betrayal had unraveled. Marie walked in with one last update. Want to see something interesting? She handed me a USB drive. It contained security footage from Mark's office. The video showed him tearing through documents, screaming at board members, and finally collapsing at his desk. In one moment, he tried to access an account I'd already frozen, his face crumpling as he realized just how thoroughly he'd been outmaneuvered. Should we worry about retaliation? Marie asked. They're finished, I replied with certainty. They just don't know it yet. 1 year to the day after the wedding fiasco, I sat at my desk, reviewing the final reports. The timing wasn't coincidental. I believed in symmetry when it came to justice. Mark's plea bargain sat in front of me. He'd accepted jail time in exchange for cooperating with federal investigations. His business empire was gone, his reputation obliterated. Grace's file was equally damning. After numerous failed attempts to rebuild her career, she'd moved out of state. Her visitation with Ryan was reduced after several incidents, including an attempted abduction. My parents had divorced, their social standing in ruins. My father faced ongoing investigations into his business practices, while my mother retreated into isolation. Rebecca's life was no better, her career over, her marriage dissolved. She'd sent me a letter asking for forgiveness. I returned it unopened. Marie and Diana entered my office, now colleagues in the successful security consulting firm I'd built. The last lawsuit was dismissed today, Marie said, dropping the papers on my desk. It's over. Diana smiled. How does it feel? I glanced at the photos on my desk, me and Ryan at a baseball game, on a camping trip, at his school. His once haunted expression was gone, replaced by genuine happiness. It feels like justice, I said simply. Sometimes consequences are the best teacher. Ryan appeared in the doorway, taller and more confident than ever. Dad, he said with a smile. What's for dinner? Can I ask you something? Ryan's voice was hesitant but steady. Of course, son. Are you still angry at Mom and everyone? I paused, considering his question carefully. Across the room, Marie and Diana listened silently. No, buddy. Anger burns you up inside, and it doesn't fix anything. I'm not angry anymore. I just made sure they faced the consequences of their choices. That's what real strength is, not hurting people, but making sure justice is served. Ryan nodded, his young face reflecting an understanding well beyond his years. I'm glad you came home early that day. I smiled, the weight of everything lightening just a little. Me too, son. Me too. After Ryan went off to do his homework, Diana glanced at me. Mind if I use that line about justice and consequences for the conclusion of my book? It's perfect. Feel free, I said, standing to look out the window. The world outside was quiet now, a reflection of the peace I'd rebuilt. They thought they could betray a soldier without consequences, I said softly. They learned otherwise. Marie checked her tablet and gave me one last report. Final stats. Mark's net worth down 97%. Grace unemployed in 3 states. Your parents lost over $12 million in assets and social connections. Rebecca's filed for bankruptcy. I turned to her. Not destruction, justice. They destroyed their world the moment they chose betrayal. I just made sure they couldn't hide from the consequences. As the day wound down, the office grew quiet. I finished performance reviews for my veteran employees, signed off on new contracts, and packed up to head home. Ryan waited by the door, his backpack slung over one shoulder. Pizza night? Pizza night, I confirmed. It had become a tradition, part of the stable routines we'd built together. As we walked to the car, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window, not a bitter man consumed by revenge, but a father who had fought for justice and won. The cost of betrayal had been high, but from the ashes of lies and pain, I'd built something stronger, a life rooted in truth, honor, and loyalty. On the drive home, Ryan chattered about his history project on military heroes. I wrote about you, Dad. About how you fight for what's right, not just in war, but here too. I glanced at him, seeing the confident young man he was becoming. What did you learn from everything that happened? I asked. That loyalty matters, he replied without hesitation. And that real strength isn't about hurting people, it's about making sure everyone faces the consequences of their choices. We pulled into the driveway, and I noticed Jessica's car parked outside. She stood on the porch, casual but composed, her military bearing still evident. Our relationship had grown steadily over the past year, built on mutual respect and understanding of service and sacrifice. I brought study materials for Ryan's math test, she called out. And maybe some ice cream. Ryan grinned and bolted inside, leaving Jessica and me on the porch. She'd become part of our lives gradually, never trying to replace Grace, but offering something entirely new: honesty, partnership, and trust. I saw the final court results, she said quietly. Congratulations. Or is that the right word? It's finished, I replied. That's enough. Inside, Ryan had spread his books across the kitchen table. I watched him work, remembering the frightened boy who had first told me about his mother's betrayal. That boy was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who understood honor and justice. The evening passed peacefully. Homework, dinner, and family time, all free of the lies and manipulation that had once plagued our lives. Before heading to bed, Ryan hugged me tightly. Love you, Dad. Love you too, son. Never forget what we learned this year. Never, Ryan promised. We're warriors, right? We fight for what's right. After Ryan went upstairs, Jessica stayed to help clean up. You've built something good here, she said, looking around the home we'd rebuilt together. From all that pain, you created this. I nodded. The victory wasn't in destroying my enemies. It was in creating a life that showed Ryan what justice and honor truly looked like. I'd lost my old family, but I'd gained something far more valuable: truth, integrity, and the chance to move forward with people who truly understood loyalty. Epilogue. 5 years later. Lieutenant Colonel Jack Peterson stood at the podium, addressing the graduating class of the military academy. At 45, his presence commanded even more respect than before. His reputation was legendary, not just for his combat service, but for how he had systematically dismantled those who betrayed him. Honor isn't just a word, he told the cadets. It's the foundation of everything we do. In combat and in life, you are defined by your choices and their consequences. In the audience, 13-year-old Ryan sat between Marie Rodriguez and Jessica, now Jessica Peterson. The boy carried himself with military precision, already planning his future in service. Over the past 5 years, karma had proven itself ruthless when properly directed. Grace now lived in a small apartment in Arizona, working as a waitress after her teaching career had collapsed. Attempts to rebuild her life were thwarted by the viral articles documenting her betrayal of a deployed soldier. Her supervised visitation with Ryan ended 2 years ago after she missed 6 consecutive appointments. Recently, she'd attempted to contact him through fake social media accounts, but Marie's security team quickly identified and blocked them. Mark had taken a plea deal, serving a reduced sentence in exchange for cooperating with federal investigators. His business empire was gone, his reputation destroyed, and his stolen valor exposed across military circles. My parents had divorced, their social and financial lives obliterated. Rebecca's real estate career and marriage lay in ruins. Ryan's voice echoed in my mind. Loyalty matters. Strength is about ensuring justice. He was right. The cost of betrayal had been paid in full, and I'd shown my son what real honor looked like. The autumn sun set outside, painting the world in hues of healing and hope. I had won my war, not through revenge, but through justice. From the ashes of betrayal, we built a life worth living. The cadets erupted into applause as I finished my speech. In the front row, Ryan stood tall, embodying the lessons we fought so hard to learn. The battle was over. And we had won. Steve Morrison's downfall had been nothing short of spectacular. After serving 18 months for financial fraud, he emerged into a world where every door was firmly closed. Military contractors blacklisted him, and veterans organizations ensured that his stolen valor became his primary identity. No reputable business would touch him after Diana Wright's Exposed series went national. Steve tried to start over in 3 different cities under various business names, but my network of veterans and intelligence specialists tracked his every move. Anonymous tips to prospective clients and partners consistently exposed his history of fraud and betrayal. Now he lived in a shabby apartment in Cleveland, working as a used car salesman. A fitting role, I thought, for someone who'd spent a lifetime selling lies. His attempt at a tell-all book failed spectacularly when Diana Wright published a detailed fact-check, dismantling the remnants of his credibility. My parents had fared no better. Their bitter divorce had devolved into an ugly battle over rapidly dwindling assets. My father's business partners, worried about guilt by association, forced him into early retirement. My mother lost her place on every charity board and social committee she once dominated. They still sent birthday cards to Ryan every year, but each one was returned unopened, marked no contact ordered by court. Their attempts to start over in a new city collapsed when my network ensured their history followed them wherever they went. Rebecca, my sister, tried to reinvent herself after her divorce and bankruptcy. She moved to Seattle, launching a life coaching business. The irony was striking. Her promotional materials emphasized integrity and family values. One anonymous email with archived links to news articles about her betrayal ended her new venture before it began. She now worked as a receptionist, her dreams of real estate success permanently shattered. Marie Rodriguez had transformed our intelligence operation into the nation's premier corporate security firm. Wolf Security became synonymous with uncovering corporate fraud and betrayal, our military precision making us the go-to team for major companies. "Your father's methods are being taught in business schools now," Marie told Ryan at his academy graduation. "The course is called Strategic Response to Corporate Betrayal. They use his dismantling of Steve Morrison's empire as a case study." Diana Wright's book, The Wolf's War, A Soldier's Response to Betrayal, spent 40 weeks on the bestseller list. The film Wright sold for 7 figures, though I only agreed to cooperate on the condition that the story emphasized the consequences of betrayal rather than sensationalizing revenge. "They want to do a sequel," Diana mentioned during a reception. "Focus on the aftermath, how your enemies never recovered." Grace gave an interview last month, still trying to paint herself as the victim. Nobody's buying it anymore. My marriage to Jessica 3 years ago gave Ryan the stable family environment he deserved. A military widow who understood service and sacrifice, Jessica never tried to replace Grace but built her own relationship with Ryan on honesty and shared values. "Dad's speaking at my school next month," Ryan announced one evening. "Career day. Half my class signed up for the military because of him." I watched him with quiet pride. The boy who once revealed his mother's betrayal had grown into a young man who understood that honor wasn't just about following rules, it was about ensuring justice prevailed. Our home, a beautifully restored Victorian in an exclusive neighborhood, stood as a testament to our triumph. My study displayed framed articles about Steve's conviction, Grace's revoked teaching license, and my parents' social downfall. "Some people call it revenge," I told an academy audience during a speech. They missed the point. This was about consequences, about ensuring that betrayal carries a price too high to risk paying. Steve's attempts to restart his life were continually thwarted. He was denied military contracts, and even his move to Canada failed after his history surfaced during immigration screening. Grace, now living in a small Arizona apartment, worked as a waitress. Her attempts to rebuild her career were undermined by the viral articles that detailed her betrayal of a deployed soldier. Supervised visitation with Ryan had been terminated 2 years earlier after she missed 6 consecutive appointments. Recent attempts to contact him through fake social media accounts were quickly blocked by Marie's team. Rebecca faced a similar fate. Her daughter, my niece, stumbled upon the articles about her mother's betrayal while researching a school project. The family conflict that followed forced Rebecca to change jobs yet again, downsizing to a smaller apartment in a less desirable neighborhood. "The thing about consequences," I explained during a 5-year retrospective interview, "is that they don't end. Every choice creates ripples that affect every aspect of your life. My enemies chose betrayal, and they'll spend the rest of their lives living with the results." Ryan's academic and athletic achievements filled me with pride. He earned early acceptance to the military academy, his essay about learning honor through my response to betrayal earning special recognition. Jessica's military support organization had grown into a national network, helping families maintain strong relationships during deployments. She often used Grace's story as a cautionary tale about how betrayal destroyed not just marriages but entire family networks. "Your father's requirements for the movie were clear," Diana told Ryan during a reception. "No dramatic monologues about revenge, no action movie cliches. Just the methodical reality of ensuring betrayal carries appropriate consequences." The Wolf Protocol, as Marie's firm called it, had become a globally recognized system for dealing with corporate betrayal. Identify vulnerabilities, gather evidence, apply pressure, and ensure consistent consequences. She explained to clients. "My enemies learned too late that betraying a military strategist carries implications far beyond their understanding. Their comfortable world hadn't just been destroyed, it had been systematically dismantled, leaving no chance for recovery. The greatest victory," I told Ryan as we left the academy grounds, "isn't in destroying your enemies. It's ensuring they spend every day understanding why their downfall was inevitable." Grace's latest attempt to modify the visitation agreement had just been denied. Her world, like the others, remained a monument to the cost of betrayal. And as for us? We moved forward, stronger than ever, with justice as our foundation and honor as our guide. The judge cited Grace's consistent instability and her refusal to accept responsibility for her actions. Her lawyer had withdrawn from the case after his firm received anonymous evidence of her repeated missed payments and failure to cooperate with legal processes. Steve Morrison's personal life wasn't faring any better. His third marriage ended abruptly after his new wife stumbled upon archived news articles detailing his betrayal of a deployed soldier. Attempts to date through online platforms were similarly thwarted by mysterious leaks that exposed his past, ensuring his infamy followed him wherever he went. My parents made a last, desperate attempt to attend Ryan's middle school graduation, hoping for a public reconciliation. Their forgery of an invitation, crafted by Rebecca, was exposed by Marie's security team, who stopped them at the entrance. They left in humiliation, another reminder that their choices had irrevocable consequences. "Sometimes people ask if I miss my old family," Ryan told a counselor during his academy entrance interview. "I don't. They chose betrayal over loyalty. Dad taught me that choices have consequences, and their consequences aren't my responsibility." Those words summed up everything I'd hoped to teach my son. Betrayal isn't just a personal affront, it's a deliberate act with ripple effects no one can escape. Wolf Security's corporate headquarters now stood as a monument to the power of loyalty and justice. 20 stories of gleaming glass and steel, it employed hundreds of veterans who understood the critical importance of integrity and consequences. Marie's intelligence network had grown into a global powerhouse, ensuring that my enemies could never outrun their past. Every job application, loan request, and attempt to rebuild triggered alerts that ensured their history remained relevant to the decision-makers of their future. The best part, Diana confided during a reception, is that they did it to themselves. Every piece of evidence we used came from their own actions. Their betrayal was their ultimate downfall. My calculated dismantling of my betrayers had become a case study in multiple disciplines: military strategy, corporate security, even psychological warfare. Students analyzed how I systematically eliminated every avenue of recovery, ensuring no escape from the consequences of their actions. Grace's attempt to write a blog about healing from public shaming ended as disastrously as her other ventures. Readers quickly uncovered her identity, and the comments section filled with veterans sharing their own stories of betrayal by those they loved. Steve's psychiatrist even published an anonymous case study on the psychological impact of justified social extinction. Though identities were concealed, military readers easily recognized the parallels and added their own commentary on the price of disloyalty. As I drove my family home from Ryan's academy graduation, I reflected on the past 5 years. My enemies had expected a reaction born of anger and desperation. Instead, they faced the calculated response of a tactical expert. Betrayal had been met not with blind revenge, but with systematic justice that left no loose ends. "We're meeting with the film producers next week," Jessica mentioned as she reviewed her notes. "They want to discuss the documentary series about long-term consequences of betrayal." Ryan, ever curious, chimed in. "They're calling it The Wolf's Legacy. The script is about how one soldier redefined justice." I couldn't help but smile. What had started as a deeply personal struggle had evolved into a broader message about accountability. Future generations would learn from the destruction of my enemies, understanding that betrayal carries consequences far beyond the moment it occurs. The sun set behind us as we drove home, casting warm hues over the life we'd rebuilt. In our wake lay the shattered remnants of those who believed they could betray a soldier without consequence. Ahead lay a future built on honor, strength, and the unshakable knowledge that justice, when wielded with precision, is the ultimate weapon against betrayal.